Of turmoil in the White House, while at the same time President Trump dealing with trying to keep this country safe as terror strikes again overseas. Joining me now to talk about all of it, former GOP congressman and Fox News contributor Colonel Allen West. Colonel, thank you for being with us tonight. We talked a little bit about this. Thank you. We talked a little bit about this terror attack a little bit earlier on in the show. I want to get your thoughts on it.
One of the things that we have to understand from a strategic perspective is that we have to deny sanctuary to the global Islamic Jihad wherever it is. It is not just reducing that territorial footprint that you see in Iraq and Syria, but it's also reducing those footprints that we see here within our own countries. And when you look at the European Union and the open borders policy that they have, these terrorists are able to very easily transit back and forth across from England to France to Brussels and now down into Spain. As a matter of fact, one of the concerns is that the van driver of the vehicular attack may have crossed the border and gone into France, or maybe he had some collusion with individuals from the country of France. So that's one of the key things we have to do. And I do agree with the previous guest. We've got to win that information operations war and not just be defensive, but we have to go on offense against their ideology.
So, Colonel, if you were advising the president, what would you advise him to reduce that footprint that you were talking about?
I think you have to look at the many different ways that you can put pressure on them. You have the military aspect, but then you also need to have an economic aspect to follow the money and understand where they're getting their resources and support. And when you look at these websites that are out there, we have to start working with these platforms, the social media platforms, to start reducing that footprint there. But then your guest talked about how we have to get into the prisons, because you see a radicalization process happening in our prisons, as well as some of these imams, clerics, and mullahs who are coming into the United States of America, and they're the ones preaching a lot of this hatred. All you have to do is look at England and see what is happening there.
Can you talk about a little bit about, or expand upon a little bit about this problem we're seeing in prisons? With the radicalization you spoke of?
Oh, sure. One of the things that you have to kind of understand is that this violent Islamic jihadism rewards these prisoners and these people that have conducted and committed violent crimes for that type of behavior. And so when you start to get into that mindset and say that, you know, you can be rewarded for this violence, when you start to demonize others because of the travails of this individual, that's what you see happening. It's a breeding ground in a lot of the prisons that we see all across the United States of America, as well as across Europe and other places.
Well, and Colonel, I want to switch gears with you a little bit. We've seen a lot of racial tensions over the past week in the wake of what happened in Charlottesville, innocent woman losing her life. You know, I want to ask you, there seems to be this narrative that all of this has started under President Trump. But if you look at Gallup and you look at polling really over the past 3 years, they've shown in their polling that we've seen a spike throughout the duration of the past 3 years. So what would you say about that, and why have we seen this continued increase in racial tensions in this country?
Well, I will go back to the current mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, who once said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And so there are people that are always looking for a political advantage to promote their ideological agenda. You know, one of the things I find, Lisa, very oxymoronic is that you have this violent group called Antifa that is out there that says they're against fascists. But yet you saw them taken to the streets at University of California, Berkeley in a very violent manner to oppose anyone coming to that campus to speak. And when was the last time you saw a conservative individual speak on some of these liberal campuses? You look at someone like the Black Lives Matter movement, who says that they're against the white supremacists. Well, guess what? One of the biggest white supremacists this country has known was a woman by the name of Margaret Sanger. And I don't see Black Lives Matter talking about the organization that she founded, Planned Parenthood, which are really in a lot of black communities. And then when you talk about neo-Nazis, well, you have someone by the name of George Soros, who is a Hungarian Jew, who actually worked with the real Nazis during World War II against his own people. But yet they are willing to accept his financing and funding for a lot of these leftist, progressive socialist endeavors. So I see that there's an incredible irony out there on the left when they say that these are the things they stand for.
Well, and Colonel, I want to ask you, because you had mentioned Antifa, and so I saw, we've seen articles in publications across the country. I saw a CNN article, and I'm going to look down and make sure I get this right for you. And it's titled "Unmask the Leftist Antifa Movement, Activists Seeking Peace Through Violence." So do we have the mainstream media basically normalizing these violent groups that you're talking about?
Well, you don't. It's not just the mainstream media. It is leaders of the Democrat Party. As Dan Bongino said, Black Lives Matter was invited to the White House. You heard the former Attorney General Loretta Lynch saying that she stood with the resistance movement. The same with Hillary Clinton, the former Democrat candidate for president. So these individuals, like an Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, they're not standing up and speaking out against this. So in a very simple way, they kind of wink, wink, nod, nod, encouraging this type of very abhorrent behavior.
Colonel, we so appreciate you being with us tonight and sharing your expertise. If I could talk, have a great night.